Part 3 covers internal influences, this part of the graphic. Chapter 8 starts with perception. This vignette speaks to product placement as a solution to people avoiding ads. In the nature of perception, you have exposure, and then you pay attention to it. Then you interpret what it means to you. You remember it, and then you go out and purchase or take an action that the marketer is hoping for. So in the case of exposure, you need to be in the vicinity where you could see the ad. It doesn't mean you will see the ad. When we talk about self-selection, obviously what we pay attention to is up to us. And in the digital media especially, it's more leaning in, people searching for the information rather than leaning back and just watching TV or radio. The text discusses ways people avoid advertising, and also clutter makes people want to avoid advertising. And also young people tend to want to avoid advertising, and so they go to places like Instagram and places that are slower to adopt the advertising. It took Facebook a while, it took Twitter a while, but eventually everything will be, and it took YouTube a while, but eventually everything will be monetized. One thing is that product placement, which is the solution for avoidance, isn't legal everywhere, and long ago it was common in magazines for people to put in big sections that were completely formatted like the magazine, so it appeared to be editorial content and would be believed as though it were all third party. Magazines eventually adopted the policy that they would put advertisement at the top in a little bar, or advertorial or something like that. They would identify that it was an ad so it wouldn't be deceptive. Living in a DVR world talks about all the different changes in ads, how people try to avoid ads, and things advertisers do to get around it. Besides product placement, other ways to force people to see your ads is to do giant outdoor displays, things that are different, things that you just can't miss. Paint and water towers, things like that. So voluntary exposure, one of the ways advertisers love to communicate is by getting people's email addresses or phone numbers, because if they do permission-based marketing, they get alerts, they get offers, they get discounts, they get all kinds of little things, points, loyalty points. So a whole bunch of us participate in this if we have those little Kroger tags on our keychains. Attention is when it actually gets you to process it. Again, it's selective attention. It depends on what's around you, how you are, and what the situation is. In general, bigger is better. The more often or more focused in your seeing of the ad, the better. If you can force somebody to see it on the internet, you can use forced gateways. Repetition is good. The more times you hear an ad, the better, and in later chapters it discusses retention based on that. Attractive visuals. The picture is often the thing that draws the eye. You have to be careful that it doesn't overpower your brand. It's more important to focus on your brand and make the picture be so perfect to your brand that it is your brand. That helps, but if they're not related, you need to be careful to always keep your brand at front and center. Color and movement. Obviously, color is a great significator of a lot of things. It also has different visual properties. Black on yellow is able to be seen at the furthest distance. Red also has a real high contrast on white. So a lot of colors are used because of their distance perception too. Anything that moves is also going to draw attention. When you're thinking about colors, if you're looking at consumer products, it's smart to go look at the cereal aisle, because what's on the cereal aisle is often a predictor of what's going to be coming out and used for marketing colors in the future. If you're looking at more like fashion items, you check the Italian women's shoes for the season. In the next couple of years, you'll see those colors and all kinds of things. End caps and kiosks, when having something in a retail layout on the end of the aisle, a lot more people are going to see it than having it on the aisle. Again, they speak to the color and impact. Bigger is better, color is better. Another thing is, if you have a lot of white space, it's always been considered that upscale products have white space and separate themselves from the clutter. Another thing is what people consider are their expectations. If people are always thinking that it's going to be this way and you do something different, they like that. They'll pay attention. They'll notice it. If it's enough of a difference, they'll notice it. Individual factors. The motivation of what the person needs, the ability of them to process information, what they process it to mean. Situational factors. is how things are set up around you. If you look at the Apple Store, they have a format that they want to be in all their retail situations, and you can even go to an Asian technology store, and you'll see just clutter and pink and yellow and orange signs everywhere. Clutter, 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 and then when you look across the aisle at the Apple Store, there's a whole segment just like a trade show booth that's set up exactly like an Apple Store, totally different, totally upscale compared to everything around it. It's a situational factor that Apple wants to control. Left brain, right brain. The theory is that even though you're processing and working on your rational side of your brain, your creative side of your brain is still scanning things and might direct you on what to work on. It's considered, one side's considered business, one side's considered creative. Subliminal stimuli. This is the idea of running these super fast ads you can't see that show salty popcorn to make you want to go out and drink Coke on the break. That's what kind of kicked all that idea off. It's been studied to death for decades. There's no evidence that marketers are using it, and it's because they don't work. It's not worth the money. Interpretation is what you believe things to mean, and you have to have a reference point. For instance, if you build something giant for the lobby of an atrium of a big building, it might be 30 feet tall, but if you just took a photograph of the item alone with no background, people would have no reference. You'd either have to photograph it once it was installed for size, or you would put a person next to it to advertise it without that reference. People associate things with what they already know. They'll say, oh, that's like a something with a something, and that's how all of us relate. We have to go back to our own experience and kind of see it as an improvement on something we already know. Individual characteristics. Stimuli mean things as individuals interpret them. It just depends on how much things affect them that they see, how natural it is for them to use lots of products or to stick with a product that they've been satisfied with, their expectations of what they think a product should be. You know, we talked about you couldn't do Lifesaver soda. You have to stay within what you expect. Another thing is that a brand always has a higher expectation of quality, a well-known brand, and so the coupons and promotions in store do work for that group more than any other group. Situational characteristics. Again, we come back to color. We come back to what's going on around. You don't want to have ads running on a program that's antithetical to your own mission. So you have to be thinking about that in the advertising world. Color. Come back to color again for packaging, because certain colors mean certain things to people. You can create associations just by the way that things are placed in an ad. There are lots of different ways to try to create associations. Ambush marketing is just basically hanging at an event or being an advertiser at an event so you can have access to the list. Figure ground. This involves keeping your product front and center. Good advice. Changing something that's just noticeable difference. What that means is when we have a recession, a Frito bag will just put in fewer Fritos and more air. They won't really tell you that they've lowered the content. It still looks the same, but you get home and realize there are fewer chips. When the recession is over, they put the chips back in the bag with less air, and they relabel the top quarter of the package to say now 20% more or something like that, and people believe it's a better value and it kickstarts sales. That's been going on for a long time. There's also a famous marketing story about a guy who ran a cookie company that was just chock full of nuts or chocolate or chips or something, and he cut the input product volume by 5% and increased sales, got promoted. The next guy did that. The marketing guy cut out a little bit, 5% of the specialty product, and that gave it its uniqueness. And same thing happened 2 or 3 times till the whole company collapsed, because they finally had just diluted the product too much. The small print needs to be bigger in a lot of cases. We've seen that in medicine and foods, and now it's going to be on menus and nutrition. There's going to be a whole lot more information available to consumers. That's a trend that is going to create a lot of jobs too. Quality signals. What makes people think something's high value? All things being equal, price is almost always the determinant of value. Discounts really only work for brands that have a high price value. If anybody else does it, it doesn't come off as good. Having a whole lot of ads indicates that you're successful. Warranties indicate that you stand by your product. It really doesn't mean much in a way. It means as long as the company's in business, not as long as you're in business. So, but a lot of things just have real short warranties, and it's another revenue source. Legally, the definition of truth is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you're not misleading anybody. Anytime your audience is vulnerable, you have to be especially careful about that. Otherwise, you can push the limit pretty far and you usually get away with it, and the worst thing that'll happen to you is you change your ad. But if you're marketing to vulnerable people, you can attract national attention and get in trouble. Perception. Retail strategy. Stores fix it so you have to go all the way to the back of the store to get your milk and way over here to get this. So the stuff you most often shop for, they'll put where to try to entice you to go through the whole store. This is actually kind of an advantage for vegetarians and gluten-free, because they only do that anyway. Or people who are on paleo diets. It makes it a lot easier to shop. Brand name and logo development. Before you ever embark on one of these projects, be sure and go to the USPTO, U.S. Patent and Trade Office, uspto.gov, and search for TESS, T-E-S-S. That's the trademark search system. But TESS 2 is going to come up with a link, and that's the place where you can type in any name you're thinking of and find out who owns it. Coca-Cola just gave up the real thing, released it about 2 years ago. So they can go dead, and you can buy them for a different subject, different product. Branding strategies. Brand extension, that's the deal where, Bic disposable underwear just didn't quite fit. You can't always use your name on different kinds of products. When you do logo designs, logos kind of migrate over time to become more sophisticated. Some of them are so old, they've gone through 6 or 7 iterations. Aunt Jemima is a famous one. Betty Crocker has gone through probably more than anybody. KFC totally changed their logo. Pizza Hut just put out a new one. They're 2 or 3 down the road on theirs. Media. We have tons of media options nowadays. When you take your car into the dealership, they're going to absolutely check what radio station you're on, because car dealers find good success with radio. Ads are supposed to do 2 tasks according to the book: get attention and convey meaning. I was taught that they're supposed to do 4 things: get attention, get interest, create desire, and create action. And at the worst, if you can't get to the action point, you at least want to have something that will stick in their mind so they have top of mind awareness, and when they go back into their own brains the next time they have to solve a problem, they'll remember your product. You have to keep in mind some of the things in the book. They make the case that you shouldn't do humor in an insurance ad because it might not make you seem reliable, but then look at the Flow series. Another strategy for creative people is always to do the opposite of what everybody else does and then tone it down from there. Package design and labeling. This is very important because this is the last 6 seconds before a person makes a purchase. So if you pay attention in consumer marketing, you'll see an awful lot of cool product designs. They also change in and out of the recession because concerns go more to shipping and things like that. Be sure and read these learning objectives at the end, and that's the end of Chapter 8.